Thank you. With that, we'll transition to our two final questions. So my second to last question is, a lot of people view the United States as the world's moral leader on questions of authoritarianism and on questions of journalistic freedoms. And you seem to be implying that that's not the case. So I was just curious if you could first elaborate on this view. And secondly, have you ever in your life held this view? Is this something that you used to believe and no longer believe? Or
For sure. I mean, growing up, I was subject to the same teaching, and I went to a public school system and was taught that, at the time it was the Soviet Union, that the United States was the free country. The Soviet Union was the repressive one. It was kind of a battle of good and evil. The United States was founded on these noble principles, and the Soviet Union doesn't allow basic freedoms to its people. That the wars that we fight are designed to liberate and not to repress. So of course are all things that I believed into my adulthood, because you have to combat you're so bombarded with those claims that you really, before you even have defenses to them, they're already implanted in your brain, and you start interpreting the world through those assumptions before you even have the opportunity to decide whether or not you agree with them. That's what society does, is it implants these matrices or frameworks into our brain that ensures that we're seeing the world the way that society wants us to. It's what it means to be a political animal, is we're part of that kind of a collective. But then the more you start really understanding about what the United States has done in the world. I mean, I live here in Brazil for 15 years now. And in 1964, Brazil had a fledgling center-left government that was democratically elected, not remotely communist, just kind of vaguely socialist, like a kind of Bernie Sanders style socialism, some land reform, some rent control. And the Kennedy and the Johnson administration, two Democratic Party administrations, were furious because they thought Brazil was moving too close to the orbit of Moscow, and so worked with right-wing generals to just overthrow the government of Brazil, the democratically elected government of Brazil, armed the generals, gave them military support, chased the president out of the country, and then imposed a military dictatorship that ruled the country savagely for the next 21 years until 1985, from 1964 to 1985, killed dissidents, exiled journalists, banned any dissent, all of that. And that's like that's a very mild Cold War case when you compare it to like what the US did in Indonesia or in Chile or many, many other parts of the world. The dictators and the tyrants that we support all throughout the world still, that were the most important partner to the Saudi regime, to the Egyptian dictatorship. But then even civic freedoms, it's very easy, if you're not actually a dissident, to believe that your society is free, because if you're not really threatening power, of course, you're not going to feel attacked or besieged, because there's no reason to attack you or to try and persecute you, because you're not posing any threat to power. There's a famous quote often attributed, I think apocryphally, but nonetheless, to Rosa Luxemburg, the socialist activist who was murdered by the Germans in the 1930s, that she said, "He who does not move does not notice their chains." So if you're somebody who's kind of a good citizen, goes about your business, doesn't bother anybody, of course you're going to think you're free, even in the most repressive society, because you're not trying to do anything that society dislikes. And that's why I always say that the measure of how free a society is not how it treats its good, obedient citizens, but how it treats its real dissident. So people like Julian Assange, who's currently dying in a British prison despite being convicted of nothing, or Edward Snowden, who's exiled in Russia, and if he stepped foot outside Russia would be subject to the same treatment as Julian Assange. Go and do something that really threatens power, as like these Redditors are doing, and then see how free you are.